All right, good people, welcome. Happy Monday, have a seat. Welcome to episode 5 of Peeling the Onion. My name is Elvar, I'm coming directly at you from Reykjavik, Iceland, and today my guest on the show is none other than Mr. Chris Ballew. You might know him as the singer and songwriter from the Presidents of the United States of America, but really he has been very prolific outside of that band, and he has released dozens and dozens of albums. He recently ended his tenure as Casper Baby Pants, where he wrote and released music for 0 to 5-year-olds and their parents. So if you have a kid, I highly recommend you checking that out. It's really something that the whole family can enjoy. And he was kind of on a higher mission with that project. He wanted to kind of save or salvage in one way the parent-child relationship by bringing families together with that music. And he was working with non-profit groups, raising money for child and parent-related issues. And it was very DIY. He booked his own shows, put out his own albums, and it was very cool how he did all of that thing. He stopped doing Casper when COVID hit, and since then he has been releasing solo albums under his own name for the first time. I think he's on album number 6. He's doing 2 every year, every January and every July. So if you go on his website, chrisballew.org, you can find endless albums of material. He has a very nice library of ambient music, and under Sampledelic you can find, I think, close to 200 tracks where he's playing with these heavy sampled, like genre hopping plunderphonics kind of tracks. And his band Creepy Stick, it's awesome. And there's also like a bunch of old pre-President recordings there where you can hear like the early versions of songs that will become President songs. Chris, he toured with the musician Back before making it big with the Presidents, and he often compares it to being in Fame School because he was able to kind of stand on the sidelines and see how Back navigated his fame, which then helped him navigate things when the Presidents blew up like they did in the mid-90s. So anyway, I hope you liked the talk. It was super fun. Chris is a genuinely funny and a overall very nice person. If you want to keep in touch with what I'm doing or send me a message, you can add me on Instagram, Peeling the Onion Pod. And that's it. I hope you like my talk with Mr. Chris Ballew. Okay, thanks for doing this. How you been, man? What have you been up to?
Oh boy, what have I been up to? Lots of things and nothing, actually. I'm sort of considering myself retired from performing. When the pandemic hit, I had to cancel a bunch of shows, and I found myself feeling relieved. And so I took a look at that feeling and realized that after playing something like 2,000 plus, maybe 2,500 shows in my life, I had kind of burned out on it and wanted to move on to working in the studio. And I've always loved working in the studio on my own, just like a mad scientist, trying to achieve my vision for songs. And so anyway, I've been digging into that and putting out solo records. I put out 2 a year in July and January. And I'm on album, I think my next one is album number 7. And yeah, my creativity is just exploding and flowing now that I have time to investigate it.
Right, you also talked about the importance for you to have like a right palette, and how do I say this?
Yeah, I call it, well, the way I explain it is, if I find a palette and a purpose.
Right, you talked about when you find that, you explode with your creativity.
Yeah, it's true because, when you think about it, to sit down and write a song or make a recording there are billions of choices, and if you're not, for me anyway, if I'm not clear about my intention and maybe visualizing who the music is for and what the atmosphere is like when they're using the music or enjoying the music, then I get overwhelmed by choices. It's paralysis of choice is what they call it. So having a vision of who is going to benefit from this music besides me, it really helps me narrow my choices and say, all right, these elements are inside my intention and these elements are outside my intention. That doesn't mean that I censor myself, especially in the early stages of writing and recording. I really want to allow myself to be messy and take chances and maybe use sounds and textures that I wouldn't normally use, just to see where it goes. But inevitably, I kind of ended up going back and, all right, that distorted guitar was fun to play and everything, but it's really not helping my intention in this song. I have to get rid of it. So it's I kind of allow myself to be messy and crazy at the beginning and throw everything at the song. And then I mute things and get rid of things and see what I can kind of lose in order to uncover the true sort of atmosphere of the recording.
Right. Yeah, I've seen you talk about that in a video. Just add everything on, leave it for a few months, come back and strip it off. That was a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, it's fun because sometimes fragments of those textures that you don't want on the entire song end up working at one spot. Like just for one moment, it's funny to have that loud guitar go or something, and I wouldn't have had access to that one moment where it works if I hadn't thrown a bunch of other ideas at the recording. So it's pretty fun. It takes time because I'm working alone, so I need perspective. So I go through the phase after writing and recording a song where I'm proud of it. It's like the proud phase where I don't really hear it for what it is. I just hear it like, I made that, la la la, look at me. And then it takes weeks or even months or even years sometimes to then go back and having exhausted my pride, really hear what's going on and make, real intentional choices.
So did you have a weird moment there after you stopped doing Casper where you didn't really have a purpose? Were you kind of in limbo before you found this element you're working with right now, or?
Yeah, I was. And Casper's another instance where my purpose and my palette really came together, making music for 0 to 5-year-olds and their parents, and choosing. I didn't use a single distortion pedal the entire time I made Casper. Actually, I bought one for a song on, I think it was my second to last album, called Supersonic Motorcycle, about how much I did not like my neighbor's motorcycle because it was very farty. So I bought this fuzz pedal, and it was that fuzz pedal that when the pandemic hit and I stopped playing Casper shows, I took that fuzz pedal out and plugged in a guitar in and went, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about distortion. For like years and years, I just hadn't thought about using distortion. And it was so beautiful, like this fuzzy, harmonic, rich thing. And I just played. And because I had no shows and no creative sort of vision outside the Casper Baby Pants vision, I just allowed myself to play in the moment. And so every day I would plug in my distortion pedals and play, and then play piano and goof around on a synthesizer or something, but no goals. I just decided I'm going to give myself a bunch of time where I don't have a goal. I'm just in the moment, in the now. And that's something that I lost back in the 90s when the presidents were a big deal. This voice invaded my creative process, which was saying, is that a hit? Don't let that go. Is that a hit? Work on that. Is that a hit? And I couldn't just sit and play music for fun or just for pleasure. I had this very distracting voice, and it was kind of terrifying because I thought, will I ever get back to where I was, where I just had, pure impulsive creative instincts? So that 9 months or so after the pandemic started, where I was just playing were incredible. It was like revisiting my old self. And out of that came this, well, simultaneously, I was listening to a lot of Ram Dass. He's a philosopher, teacher, kind of spiritual guy who talks. He talks about all things related to being alive, being a human, having a consciousness, fear, pain, and joy, love, death. And I had never really tackled those ideas before. And suddenly my songwriting became very instinctive, and like songs were falling out of the sky in bits and pieces. Like maybe some music would fall out of the sky one day, and then a title would fall out the other day. And then I'd find that, oh, this music I made last week and this idea fit. And then lyrics just start pouring out like poetry. So I've started really writing from an interior atmosphere of like curiosity about being a human. And so, yeah, it's a whole new perspective. So that time was really essential and really a beautiful gift.
There was also one thing I noticed when I was listening to your latest album, Power Trip, that there's a lot of like mortality talk. That, I mean, you had that on your other solo albums, but definitely not as much back in the day, you know.
Yeah. I'm sorry. When you listened to Power Trip, you noticed what was going on? I didn't quite get.
In the lyrics, like mortality talk in the lyrics, like I'm gonna run out of life like an 80s arcade, I'll soon be dead, someday I'm gonna be a dry worm, you know, like that.
Yeah, you're right. That's a big theme, I guess, because I mean it's a big theme in everybody's minds, like, and this music I'm making now, I'm not imagining it for the most part as a live thing, although sometimes I'm recording a song and I think I'll make that chorus twice as long because that's the part where the festival crowd will sing. But I really have no intention of playing it live, but I toy with that visual sometimes. But the real kind of atmosphere I'm making the music for is somebody lying down with headphones on, taking an interior solo individual journey. And I think that's why I touch on those sort of like, sort of complex, maybe darker, maybe more personal musings about what it means to be alive. I just imagine somebody with their headphones on, kind of, traveling with the albums. I mean, and that's because I grew up listening to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles exclusively from the age of 3 to 9. And I traveled when I listened to that record. So basically, I'm just trying to remake Sgt. Pepper's every time I make a record now.
What other, because you've talked about Sgt. Pepper's being like a really big album for you.
Yeah.
What other like big musical influences were there? Was there like a concert you went to? Did you go to a lot of concerts back in the days when you were living in Seattle?
Yeah, I did. My first real concert was the Rolling Stones, actually.
Really? Oh, right.
Yeah, 1980, I think, 80 or 81.
Was that at the Center Coliseum or?
No, it was at the Kingdome here in Seattle, which has since been torn down. But yeah, so, and the let's see, T-Bone Burnett opened up, and then I saw the Who and the Clash in that same venue. And then meanwhile, I was going to see like punk rock all ages shows in Seattle. It was very common for bands to get together and rent out a hall that anybody could rent, like an assembly hall kind of place, and just put on a punk rock show. So I was seeing big arena shows and tiny little do-it-yourself, and I really resonated with the DIY aesthetic. Not waiting around for a scene to emerge, but forcing it to, like, the all ages punk rock scene in Seattle was really the result of bands making it happen, and that really resonated with me. The Casper Baby Pants thing was a complete DIY one man operation.
So what was there a big like punk scene in Seattle back in the day?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Farts, 10-minute warning, the U-Men, Blackouts. There was a really cool, like, everything from straight punk rock to like arty new wave stuff. It was all over the map. And yeah, it was a lot. The Fastbacks, the Colored Twigs was one of my favorite bands that nobody's heard of. But then on a bigger scale, I have to cite, if it's not the Beatles, I'd have to cite Brian Eno. I mean, everything from his pop songcraft, the recording quality, the layering, the techniques he used, the doubling of vocals, the weird abstract poetry that you can't make sense of. And then when he started making the ambient music, that really pulled me in. It's just the variety, the sort of curiosity and honesty with which he explores sound is something I definitely aspire to do. I did meet him one time, and he was standing outside of a art college where he was going to give a talk, and people were streaming in, and he was talking to a friend outside on the sidewalk, and people were coming up and sort of shaking his hand for a moment, saying, well, excited for the talk or whatever. And I kind of got in line to do that. But meanwhile, the conversation he was trying to have with his friend was being compromised by these people walking up for a little handshake. I was the straw that broke the camel's back, because when I walked up and said, "Oh, Mr. Eno," and I extended my hand, he was just like, "Will you please fuck off?" So Brian Eno has told me to fuck off, which I wear as a badge of honor.
Definitely. You should get a tattoo.
Yeah. Brian Eno told me to fuck off. Yeah.
So when you went to college, what, beginning mid-80s? You went to the East Coast to college.
Yes.
SUNY Purchase.
That is correct.
What were you studying at SUNY?
Well, I started in fall of '83, and I thought I wanted to be a painter. I don't know really where I got that idea. Well, really, I was going to art school to avoid going to music school. Music school was the obvious choice, but there was a voice inside my gut that said, you know what, just hunt and peck on your own time and find your chemistry by instinct rather than by theory. I was a real serious piano player from the age of 4 to 14. And I had, teachers and stuff, and I was being groomed to be a concert pianist. But I just didn't have the tenacity or wherewithal to really follow that through. But I did get a taste of theory, and I really didn't like it. So I went to art school to not be a music major. And so I just randomly picked painting. But really what I did is, because the teachers in the painting department, I didn't find that inspiring. So I started hanging out with the filmmakers and the actors, because they really inspired me. The dare of being a filmmaker is extremely intense and full of risk and dependency on others and cooperation and failure and stress. And I just really, I don't know, I connected with film and movies, and I still am a huge movie fan, storytelling through that medium. So really, I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but I kind of also feel like I got a film degree.
Did that help you with your lyric writing? Because a lot of them have been like very picturesque, was that an influence or not?
I think so, because it was about narrative. It's about narrative through time. Visual art is more of a split second of recognition that then you bask in as long as you want. But yeah, the arc of character and introduction of character sort of conflict resolution, growth, that kind of thing. Absolutely. I think it especially influenced the Casper Baby Pants thing, because even a song that was abstract, I tried to put a little narrative tension in. And then some of my songs the Casper songs were just straight out narrative. Well, let me tell you a story about this, kind of thing. So yeah, I think it really did. And until this moment, I hadn't really thought about that connection, but I think that's that's very true.
So why did you move to Boston after you graduated from SUNY, right?
Yeah, I graduated in 1987, in the spring of '87, and then there was a teacher that came to teach at the school, a visiting artist, and at the end of the year, he said, "Well, if any of you students want to work for me in Boston, I need people to build models." He did installations in public spaces and he needed people to build models and ship artwork and, travel with his artwork to different cities and set up these elaborate sculptures. So me and the drummer for the band I had in college went to Boston, and eventually the bass player from that band joined us too in Boston. And so we
Is that Phil Franklin you're talking about, or?
Yeah, Phil Franklin, exactly.
Okay.
Well, you've done your research. That's great.
So it was just like a spur of coincidence that you went to Boston.
Yeah, really, I had no idea what I was going to do after school. I went back to Seattle for that summer and worked my last summer at the amusement park, where I worked all through the 80s. It was a fantastic one. Super great people watching. I still walk through an amusement park and I can smell the hydraulic fluid, and it just takes me
Nice.
back. So Phil hitchhiked out to Seattle, and at the end of that summer, he hitchhiked out to Seattle, and then we drove across country and went to Boston. Actually, no, we went to New York first, and I lived in New York, in Brooklyn, for a little bit, and then we all went up to Boston to take that teacher up on his offer. And the offer was still there, so yeah, we worked for him for a couple of years, and that was a fantastic experience.
So you were working on that thing for a couple of years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had different sculptures going up in Germany and France, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. We would travel all over and, and then, like I said, build models and ship components for the installations and stuff like that. Yeah. And then we started playing in the street and in the subway, me and Phil, and eventually Dale, the bass player. We started busking for, beer money and pizza money. And that was, as far as songwriting goes, that was incredibly instructive, because to get somebody to stop when they're on their way somewhere and listen to you is, especially in a city like Boston, where everybody's like, business like, especially, when you're waiting. I guess we had a little bit of a trapped audience in the subway because they were waiting for the train. So, but yeah, that was really informative as far as, reaching out and grabbing someone with a literal hook is concerned. So yeah, that was fantastic proving ground for songs.
And that's also very important, because you met Mark Sandman in Boston, who showed you the ways of the 2 and 3 string, which became kind of your...
Yeah. I cannot remember how Mark and I met. And one time he and I tried to remember, and we couldn't remember. We just feel like we've known each other forever.
Nice.
So, in fact, I have the very same guitar up on the wall here that was set up as a 2-string that he had in his studio. And I just picked it up and went, I'm home. And, the rest is history, as they say.
What kind of gauge strings do you use, like on the 2-string? Is it a special gauge you could?
Yeah, it depends on the guitar, because you're working with different lengths of scale. There's 24-inch guitars and 22. But in general, I think I used a 60 and a 36. So they were a little, and tune them to C sharp, G sharp. It just happened that when we bought tuners, when we were doing the Presidents and we had our instruments and we didn't have tuners, we just tuned by ear. We bought tuners and we realized, we're in C sharp. So we just stuck with that. But it turned out to be a kind of faded key, because a lot of the grunge, the heavy like music of the time, people would tune down to D, but some people were tuning down to C sharp for extra heaviness. So we kind of ended up being in the key of grunge, but not following the pattern of it, lyrically necessarily.
It's so awesome though that you went to Boston on a whim, because you met Mark there and you met Spider John Kerner there, like 2 big, very, very big influences who kind of really changed the trajectory of your career, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, Boston is huge, and I bought the 2-string that ended up, the guitar that ended up as a 2-string being the guitar I played in the Presidents and on the debut record. I bought at a pawn shop in Boston. Not to forget about that Boston connection, but yeah, Spider John. Boy, when I wandered into that bar and saw him on the back there, just like eyes closed, stomping his foot, singing these songs about animals and frogs and monkeys and chickens, I was like, oh my God, I'm free. It can have integrity. It can be like, I don't know, more complex than just the obvious narrative I'm singing about. Yeah. So, yeah, Boston was a big deal for me, for sure. But then one day slowly got less and less healthy, and I was eating badly, and I was kind of sick, and I had a skin rash, and it was winter, and I woke up one morning and I went, what am I doing? I'm from Seattle. Seattle is gorgeous and wet and beautiful and green and full of water. I need to go home. I eventually made my way home in a little Volkswagen van that didn't have any heat, and I left in February. So I had to go all the way down to the bottom of the United States to go across the bottom and up the West Coast because I had no heat.
So when you came, you knew Dave Dieter before. You guys were like in school together when you were younger. Did you introduce him to, like, how did the 3-string come up? Did Mark also introduce you to the 3-string?
Oh yeah. Well, I think Mark had what he called a tritar, which was 3 strings, but it was pretty different than the 3-string I ended up creating because it was purely a slide instrument. Those strings were way up above the neck, and kind of a textural instrument. You know, he would kind of work his memory man delay pedal with his foot, kind of make these kind of ethereal, ghosty slide guitar bits on the 3-string. So I wanted it to really be related to the 2-string that I could play with my fingers, but then have one more string so that you could get a little more complex with the voicings. And Dave Dieter is a very accomplished 6-string player. And I kind of went to him as like, I'd love to pick up where we left off and collaborate again because you're such a great player. Would you consider playing a 3-string? And I think he was a little bored at the time with his 2-string vocabulary. And he's like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And he took to it. And I think by 96, like the tour for the second album, he actually went back to a 6-string tuned open live.
Okay.
Yeah, because he got a little bored with the limitations of the 3-string, and I think he kind of needed to stretch out a little bit. So there was a moment there where he was playing 6-string on tour, but not in a traditional tuning.
So was it your idea because like Jason saw you guys play and kind of pestered you to get into the band, and then you finally kind of let him in, right?
Yeah.
And was it your idea to strip his kit?
Yes. Yeah, it definitely was. I went to him. I'm like, okay, you can play with us, but here are the rules: no cymbals. We gave him a little like 8-inch splash cymbal, I think it was, and a tiny hat. And then we gave him or maybe he came in with the idea. I don't remember who came up with the idea for the cowbell and the woodblock, but I think that might have been Jason. So yeah, it was a really interesting thing, taking a serious like rock drummer and limiting his choices and then expanding the vocabulary to include like cowbell and woodblock. The idea was very like scientific almost. I wanted to make a hole in the sound that the band was making instrumentally for the vocals to sit. You could really hear the story and the imagery of the song. So it wasn't just, dependent on our swagger or just pure chemistry or whatever live. I wanted to tell stories. Again, I guess going back to that filmmaker, hanging out with the filmmakers in college. So yeah, I had a reason. It wasn't just like, I don't like cymbals, which I really didn't like cymbals. So he responded positively to the choice because it had a purpose.
It's also funny because he's what seems to be a left-handed drummer, has the hi-hat on the left side, but like his toms are set up on the right side. Then when he started using the right cymbal, he has it sometimes on the left side, sometimes on the right side, like he mixes it up. I mean, Mike Borden from Faith No More, he does the same thing, but that's the only 2 drummers I remember that choose to play it like that.
Well, don't forget Ringo Starr.
What?
I believe Ringo Starr is a left-handed drummer that plays a right-handed kit.
Right. He really? Okay, I did not know that. I didn't know that.
It's either that or he's. I think it's that. I'm not sure, but there is something going on that I remember being like, oh, Jason Finn and Ringo Starr are doing the same thing. In fact, as a side note, our stage tech from the 90s is now Ringo Starr's tech. So
okay.
There's another.
Nice. You didn't see George Harrison when he played in Seattle? No, you were too young. It was like 74. You must have been like 9. Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that. I know Paul McCartney played at the Kingdom where the Clash and all those, Jones played. But my mom went down to get tickets and she was 2 people away in line when it sold out. This is the old fashioned when the sellout is like, sorry, no more tickets. And they pull the shade down.
Right. Okay. Would
Anyway.
you have seen that concert? Was that?
Oh yeah, she was down there to get tickets for me and her to go see
Damn.
McCartney. Yeah, and that night I remember sitting in my bedroom going, "A Beatle is in my town and I can't go," and I was just so destroyed.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you guys were starting in like 94, how was the scene? Were things like still super cluttered, like bands moving in like crazy, like they did at the Grunge Explosion, or how was it?
Yeah, I think it was still, well, it was vital in a sense that people were lining up to see the next big thing. I mean, everyone was like, what's next? What's next? Kurt Cobain, unfortunately, had passed away in April. And we had started, our first gig with Jason was in December of 93. So, and then I went off and toured with Beck for 2 tours. So the Presidents were kind of on pause when Kurt passed away. And I think that moment in time really sort of signaled the tail end of innovation in the quote unquote grunge palette or whatever. So our experience was, we played, I got back from touring with Beck and we just played as much as we could. We thought, let's push it. Jason Finn was he was also booking bands at this club called Mo. And we just said, let's just book our band as much as possible and see what happens. And because people were so hungry for what's next, it just was this fertile ground and our fans base just grew and grew and grew. So I don't know how I would do it now. I guess you do it with social media, but back then, we really did it. We really played and had a band because we were bored. we were fighting boredom, and not to get too global about it, but I just feel like it's interesting now. You don't need to be bored ever now. You're constantly
it's horrible.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, I guess it's a form of evolution. It's how we're evolving. But I guess you just look elsewhere for the inspiration. I think maybe it's more about like having a thirst or a vision. I mean, like, for example, I make music now and I don't really do any social media. I let people know when albums are out, but I'm not like on there constantly saying, don't forget about me. Don't forget about me. Just because I'm kind of rooted back in the 90s when it was like, we're just doing this for ourselves and to make our lives richer. And if we follow that impulse, the idea is that we're having fun. The joy is in the music. The joy is in the craft of the music, and people will naturally be will naturally gravitate towards others who are having fun and feeling fulfilled. So I'm still kind of writing with that with the stuff I do now. In fact, with the Casper Baby Pants thing, I never did any promotion really. I played shows, there's that, but I just decided, I'm going to let happy parents tell each other about the music, and that's an honest way for it to grow. And it was a slow burn, but it worked. So, yeah.
So you did the Froggy Style demo tape. 4 of those songs end up being like on the debut album, right?
Yeah.
Right. Did the Froggy Style tape get a lot of traction?
Yeah, well, I was on tour with Beck on the second tour of the 2 that I did. I called Jason one day and he's like, you got to get back, man. We are selling these tapes like crazy. He was a bartender at a bar called The Comet, and he was selling them over the bar at The Comet. And he's like, we're running out. And they're just like selling like crazy. So it had the desired effect of kind of keeping the flow going while I was off on tour with Beck.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about Jason's drumming. I was listening to, like, really going back and listening to it, because he was in Love Battery and they released Straight Free Ticket like within 10 days of your debut, and that's he's a whole different drummer there. He's doing more straightforward thing.
Yeah.
But with the Presidents, because he didn't have anything to work with, he's doing all these flams, these ghost notes,
Yes.
One of the like very underrated. Like that's one of the best drumming I've heard.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. Jason was so good at listening to the vocals. He listened because he made space for the vocals. He sort of rode my vocals more than anything else. And because I'm not playing the kind of bass, like the two string isn't the kind of situation where I'm trying to lock in with the kick drum, you know. I was really playing more of a rhythm bass and more strummy. Um, so he was kind of free to like make the patterns whatever he wanted and not worry about locking in necessarily as much. So yeah, and he just, he broke his ankle at one point, and Mike, the guy who now works for Ringo, sat in for a couple of gigs, and he's a great drummer, Mike Musburger, fantastic, but he's very metronomic. He's very zeros and ones. Like every snare hit is a clean snare hit. And you're right. Like Jason, he's like kind of ghost notes and like letting the sticks kind of float on the snare. And the difference was really stark. It's like, okay, now I see how big of a important piece Jason's drumming is, this whole thing.
No, I saw that when you guys played Volcano on Conan, like in beginning of '97, and Jason was out with the flu or something, and you had Max Weinberg from the East Street Band, and he's a great fucking drummer, like great what he does, one of the best. But there you could hear like, fuck, Jason's touch just completely fits the song and your songs in general. It really made it really click for me. Like, what? Okay,
Yeah, I do know. Believe me, that was that was a hair-raising night because we rehearsed the song. That song's a little complex, has some stops and starts, key change, dynamics. And we rehearsed with Max, and it went great. And then we went to do the actual performance, and he played through the stops. He stopped when he wasn't supposed to stop. And so for me, I watched that, and I can remember the gears in my brain spinning like, okay, shit, what is he gonna like, what's next, what are we doing? And we could have retaken it, but we were kind of punk rock back in the days, and we were like, nope, that's what it is. Okay, here we go. Anyway, it's not as bad as we thought it was. When I look at it now, I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, it's a little stumbly, but at the time we're like, oh geez, Max.
It's also when you guys played with Chris Novoselic, when you sang on a plane, and Jason is just nailing these Dave Grohl fills. It's just
yeah, I know, that was super fun.
It's a good performance also by you. I love it. You're always falling into the crowd and like
Yeah, that was pretty fun. We did a couple other shows where he would just show up during the encore, and we would play Nirvana songs. We did
nice.
We did a county fair one time where, we did the set, and then here's the encore. We do a couple songs, and then what? Chris Novoselic's here. Let's go. It's super funny. I don't know whose idea that was. He, when we were broken up for 5 years, we were doing things in that time. We made an album. We have started a band with Sir Mix-a-Lot and all that, but we never really appeared as the Presidents officially. But it was Chris who asked us to be his backup band at an awards ceremony where he was getting like a Life Achievement Award. He asked us, and that was the first time we went, yeah, I think we could actually be the Presidents again. And so I like to credit him with reforming the band.
It's also another thing about the debut when you're listening to how the string instruments, like even when I was younger and listening to it, I was like, what are they doing? Just like in the intro of Kiri, like what are they playing? It doesn't sound like guitar and bass. It sounds like this one big instrument. At times it really blends in such a nice, weird way,
Yeah, I do. That's exactly what we were trying to do in the early days. We're like, this is not bass drums, bass drums, guitar. This is one massive instrument and guitar and drums and vocal. Yeah, we were really trying to blend them. When we got on tour and we had a front of house guy that, had to fill a bigger space, we ended up actually taking my instrument and running it through an octaver and creating a low note.
Okay.
We created a note that the front of house guy, who actually was Nirvana's front of house guy, Craig, he could kind of mix that in when necessary in bigger spaces, so that we had this, like, we could fill the space, because the sound we were making on our own was pretty dinky. So we started to become less of three dorks who were trying to rock and more of an actual rock band, as time went on.
So at the beginning, when you were playing shows, were you able to translate that vibe of the first album with the instruments blending? Was that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we were for sure. Yeah, it was our intention. And it wasn't super noticeable when we got to the bigger venues. This whole it was just a subtle thing that he would use to kind of fill up the low end. But when you play bigger venues, you have to kind of fire up the machine and let it run. And as opposed to a small venue where you can be like, hey, we're all in this together. Let's see what happens. We might improvise something, or somebody will do something funny and we'll work it into the song. So there's a little less of that cabaret kind of improvisational opportunities. But so it kind of, sonically, we started to sound a little bigger and heavier. And then also the combination of that with sort of the, being professional and caring about the person in the back having as much fun as the person in the front means you want to be tight and yeah.
So you got signed like in the mid-90s. Like a lot of bands got signed and never went anywhere, but you got signed. When did you start to get the feeling like, okay, this is actually going to be something big? Did it just happen gradually, or?
Yeah, I think it was, having a video on MTV, that was a big deal. That felt, I wasn't as connected to the radio. The radio stations were a big deal too, for sure, as far as people being aware. Marco Collins at the end was a huge early adopter and supporter, and I'm still friends with him. He's a great guy. And then the guys at K-Rock really, what was it? Something and Bean, Kevin and Bean. But I didn't listen to the radio that much, but I did watch MTV, especially back when it first came on. I worshipped MTV back in the early 80s. And yeah, I was in Hawaii with my new bride, and we turned on MTV in the little cabin we were staying in, and it was a sort of top 10 countdown, and we were sandwiched in between like Janet Jackson and some other massive superstar at number 4 or something, and I went, oh boy, here we go.
Was that your first? Was Kitty your first video that you did ever, or how was that?
No, we did Lump first.
You did Lump first. Okay, so that really blew up.
Yeah, we did Lump, and we shot enough footage for 2 versions of Lump. So there's Lump A and Lump B out there. But one version in particular kind of blew up on MTV, and then we did Peaches, and then we did Kitty. Then we did, I think Kitty and Dune Buggy pretty close together, but those never really caught on fire. In fact, the Kitty video we actually never even released because it just did not work. We've released it since as an archive kind of thing, but
right, it's quite a disorienting experience, actually.
Yeah, and it's very brown and kind of just gross and dark and not very well thought out. So it's funny, Roman Coppola, Francis Ford Coppola's son, did all of those videos, and when he was on, he was on, and when he was off, he was off.
Okay, either or. Yeah, I heard he made like $100,000 video that you threw away. Is that the Kitty video you're talking about? Or?
Yeah, that's Kitty. I think it was 110,000 is the number I remember.
Okay,
which is ridiculous. I mean, sure. We had to have a professional mouse, a professional cat, a professional dog. I don't know what we were spending that kind of money on. I think people were ripping us off, but whatever.
It's funny though, because like that's in 95. Do you remember the Rattled by the Rush video by Pavement? That's also in 95, and they had to alter that because it was so disorienting experience. Have you seen it when they're playing in the subway and they're like moving the cameras, and at the end they made like a new version where they have like a bathroom and they put like the video on a bathroom tile, and they released that on the TV.
Huh? No, I don't know that. What's the name of the song?
Rattled by the Rush. It's from Wowie Zowie from the same year. I was just wondering if like disorienting videos were in 95.
I never saw that, but I'm going to check it out. I don't think they were in. That's why we never released Kitty. It was brown and disorienting, which is a lethal combination.
Right. But it's awesome. Like this, especially Lump and Peaches. It's like in Peaches, you have this yellow shirt, these golden pants, and Peaches written on top of your head, and doing these weird little dance moves, like that are kind
Yeah.
of distinctively you. You know, it's like, hey, it's the Ballew dance moves. You know, was that
Yeah,
something you started
yeah.
to come up with when playing with the Presidents, or had you been doing that for a long time, or like?
It was kind of an extension, I guess, of the idea of being small. Like my dance moves were always kind of like little and kind of, I don't know, little jerky, funky kind of moves. I guess I've never really been comfortable being like, like that traditional kind of rock and roll, like muscular, macho, big presentation. I always wanted to go the other direction. And like I said, in the early days of the Presidents, it was like three dorks trying to rock. And I think that's why the audiences responded, because there was this empathetic, like, oh, look at those poor little dorks trying, as opposed to like, oh yeah, it's a rock show, we're taking care of all your rock needs, which is kind of what we became later. So anyway, the dance moves are kind of an extension of this, like, let's just keep it as tiny as we can.
So you guys, you really blew up in like Australia and New Zealand. You got pretty big in Japan. Do you know why you blew up so, like, especially in Australia? Do you know, like, because you didn't get like fewer bands who came over there? Do you know what it was? Why it caught on so big?
Hold on one second. I'm going to go ahead and go in the house because my internet connection got a little funky there, and I missed some of you. Let me go in the house, and then if you could ask that question again, that would be awesome. Sure. Hold on. Yep. I'm going. We got two buildings here, house and studio. All right. I am in house. Let me just quickly get a glass of water.
Sure. So I was asking you about, because you got really big in Australia. You were almost like bigger in Australia compared to how many people live there compared to the US.
Oh yeah, I think we were bigger per capita in Australia than
right.
Oh yeah, we had to have fake names at hotels. A couple times we had to run for cars like we were in a Hard Day's Night. And it got a little ugly too, because one day we played a promotional show at a shopping mall, and the crowd was getting too big for the space, and a poor girl who had asthma up front started to have an asthma attack and passed out, and we thought she was in really bad shape. We got her backstage. We stopped the show, got her backstage, and we all just kind of looked at each other like, this is too much. I don't know how the Beatles or anybody, with more recognition than we had deals with that kind of pressure. It's very intense. But as a fun side note, when I checked into hotels, my secret name was Paul McCartney. So it was kind of a nod to him because, his name when he checked into hotels was Paul Ramone, which is where the Ramones got their name.
Definitely. Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't get hassled. People didn't think Paul McCartney was in Australia then?
I guess not. If he was touring in Australia at the time, that would have been a bad choice, but I don't think he was.
Okay. So, because I saw like Dave was writing in his diaries, like how disorienting it was getting so mega big, like you lost all touch kind of with the audience. That like, yeah. And I can imagine also just like people getting hurt at your concerts would be like the absolute worst thing that could happen to you. It's like.
Yeah, it's exactly the opposite of the intention. So, yeah, but it didn't happen a lot. They were a couple isolated moments, but really the major dynamic that kind of wore us down was kind of a feeling of losing the very life that inspired the music in the first place. We had very beautiful, simple lives before we got recognized, or before we got popular as a band. And that life kind of fueled the music, like moving back to Seattle from Boston was this unbelievably heady, beautiful, oh my God, this city is so gorgeous and jungly, and there's decay and bugs and animals, and it was all this like nature. And whereas Boston's way more kind of, urban, cement, brick, all that stuff. So, and just falling back in love with my hometown was bottled in that music. But then it became successful, and we were plucked out of that environment and put in, hotels and cars and backstages and stuff. And nobody wants to hear the rock star complain, but it's just a fact that when the engine of your success is taken away, then you're sort of adrift, and like you lose track of what it's all for. It seemed to be all for improving the record label's bottom line, and our well-being and health, and the health of our nervous systems and the health of our relationship with our families was not a concern of the people that were really driving the boat
Sure.
or whatever. So yeah, the disconnect became sort of untenable more than the pressure of like extreme fame, because we really only felt that in Australia. It was everywhere else, it was very manageable. I always like to say that we were fame-ish, not famous, because when you're famous, you got to deal with like security for your kids to get to and from school. When you're fame-ish, you get to do all kinds of fun stuff and nobody really bugs you.
Okay, you weren't quite that, but you got quite mega there in like, early 96. You were like, you were everywhere. You were always like on Conan or Leno, Letterman, MTV, Carved in Rock. Like you were really like, yeah.
Yeah, we did it. We did the full experience. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm very proud of what we achieved, and proud to have, and feel very lucky to have kind of come into success in an era when the traditional like avenues that we all grew up aware of were still in existence. Like get signed to a major label and get on MTV and get on the radio and do late night TV, and then watch your sales figures explode the next day.
Right, right. I mean, you did turn down being on Saturday Night Live in like October of 95 before you really blew up.
I know.
Because you were getting married. So you were like, you weren't completely chasing the fame machine, it seems. It's kind of interesting to see that.
Yeah, well, there's a story behind that Saturday Night Live thing. So we were in LA, and we were at the Sony headquarters in LA, and we were walking around and talking about promotional stuff. And I said something, because Saturday Night Live was not that funny at that time. And I said something like, that show sucks these days. I don't want to be on that show. I was being like a, snotty kind of, I was being a little mean because I was feeling like I didn't have control of my own life and stuff like that. So it turned out in the group of people we were with, the woman who was in charge of booking us on Saturday Night Live was in that group and heard me say that and was like, well, screw you. We're not going to book you. Then my wedding day is set, and set for a long time, 6 months out pretty much. And here comes Donnie Einer, the president of Columbia Records, calling me saying, hey, you can be on Saturday Night Live, but it's your wedding night. It's October 15th and or 21st, I guess it was. And it was just a moment where I was like, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to get married as planned, and I'm not going to. It was a power play, right? Because he was like, we will pay for your honeymoon. We'll pay for the wedding to be rescheduled. And I just said, you know what? There's things. This is family, and no, I'm not going to do it. So yeah, it's a jewel in the crown that we're missing. So I kind of regret it, but I didn't. There was a point where you just have to be like, no, I'm a human being with a life, and I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean, you would have just played the lump anyways, like you did on all the other shows.
Yeah, exactly. But if I Lump and Peaches, like another TV appearance, blah blah blah.
Was it your idea? Because you played lump on Letterman, you played lump on Leno, then you went on Mad TV in January '96, play lump again. Was it you just like, hey, like just do lump?
Yeah, well, that's what they wanted.
They wanted that again.
Yeah. They just wanted us to play that hit. And you know what? I was fine with it because I love that song. I love it. I still love it. Yeah, it's one of the proudest songwriting moments. I painted a picture with the lyrics that confuses everybody, but the lyrics are super clear as to what's happening. But everyone's like, what's lump about? I'm like, it's about a woman in a housecoat in a river. I don't know why, but it is. It just came out that way. So anyway, yeah, I was very happy. I could have played that song 500 times a day. It was really pleasurable. I never played that song without feeling like it was the first time we were playing it.
That's kind of the opposite with Kitty, right? You kind of started dislike playing that song, or what?
It was fun and everything, and it was tricky because it was explosive at the beginning, and then kind of like this long, sort of weird, bluesy slog through the verse. So dynamically, it was kind of bizarre. I guess it wasn't that bizarre. It was the loud, quiet thing that everyone was doing. It's just it was a little less poetic lyrically, and a little less kind of surreal, and a little more kind of just straight goofball.
Sure, sure. I thought I remembered you talking about that you kind of grew tired of playing Kitty.
Yeah. I think we did. Yeah, I mean, in fact, when we got back together in New Year's Eve 2002 to reunite at the Crocodile Cafe, we forgot to play Kitty. I got home and we got in bed and went, that was a really fun night. Oh my God, we forgot to play Kitty.
Or Kitty.
Yeah, so weird. We did play a Soundgarden cover, but we didn't play Kitty.
What song did you play?
Spoon Man.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, it was one of our staples. Like on tour, we just bust into it every once in a while.
Okay. It's funny because I've heard you talk about talk the second album down like it's a good EP and all that. You were rushed into doing it, and then I listen back to it. I'm like, I don't know, I like it. It's
Yeah, I agree. I listened to it just not too long ago, and I loved it. Yeah, I think, you know what? We were so tired, and we were told by our record label, like, you got to capitalize on the momentum and make another record right now. And our manager, to her eternal credit, Stacy Slater, said, nope, take some time off, reconnect with your people, have your barbecues and play Frisbee in the park and get back to your lives, and then make a second record. And we listened to the label and not our manager. And it was a huge mistake. Not because we made necessarily a bad record, but we didn't make a great record. And we were tired. And to us, it sounds like we were tired. But then I listened to Lunatic to Love. I'm like, those guys aren't tired.
Right. They're pumped.
It's amazing. It's like land speed record.
Yeah, nice. I actually I interviewed Greg Norton the other day. He's great on your record. But it's funny because things in Iceland, they kind of catch on a little late. So like your first album caught on here a little late, and then your second album came out, and that got like super big here in Iceland. And it's funny, I was looking over like overall single releases, and Peaches went to #1 here. We have like the Icelandic top 40. So
Wow.
Peaches went to #1. I think it was the only country in the world. It's like the highest charting position in the world.
Wow.
And Doombuggy went to #2 in Iceland, the highest charting position in the world. And also Mach 5 had the highest overall. So you're welcome.
Why didn't we go to Iceland? Why didn't we tour Iceland? This is crazy. Iceland never came up. You know what probably happened? So somebody at Columbia was in charge of breaking the presidents in Germany. And Germany just did not want us. They want rock. They don't want rock and roll, or at least at the time, they wanted rock. And they just kept sending us back to smaller and smaller venues. I think whoever was in charge of breaking us in Iceland was not paying attention, or maybe that person didn't exist at the label. But I remember sitting down one time at a lunch with that person who was booking us over and over again, or forcing us to go to Germany. She had a couple glasses of wine, and I was like, tell me what is going on. Why are you sending us to Germany 5 times in 1995 or whatever it was, or 6? And she said, you know what? If I don't break you in Germany, I lose my job, and I'm terrified of losing my job. And I just went, okay, nobody has our interest, in mind. It's sink or swim for all these people who have these like tasks in front of them that don't relate to the global view at all. So anyway, yes, I wish we had toured Iceland instead of Germany. Darn it.
Sure. Never too late. I mean, you have a 30th anniversary next year. Just come to Iceland.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a thing right now. We have an opera house. Bands are coming. Like Wilco came and played 3 nights in a row. Pavement came and played 3 nights in a row. It's like a Vegas shit going on in Iceland now. So get on that horse.
That's great. I love it. Wow. You never know. I'm pretty done with being in loud rock bands that require ear protection, but I'm also a big fan of Never Say Never. So who knows?
Do you use support for singing? Because I was watching these live videos from the 90s. You're jumping all around to go running across the stage, and then you get up to the mic and you sing like seamlessly without losing a breath.
Yeah. I'm in pretty good shape, and I always have been. I love moving on stage. I think it came from when I was a little kid. I remember seeing bands that did not move on stage, or seeing promotional pictures of bands where they're all just flat affect staring at the camera. And I remember thinking as a kid, like, if I ever get to that position, I'm not doing that. I'm going to give the crowd and the people who are looking at pictures of us an experience. I want them to, like, you know, I don't know. I wanted the people to feel entertained, I guess, like, so yeah, I did take one singing lesson where I learned how to use my diaphragm, to like a muscle in my core, to move air up through my vocal cords instead of using my vocal cords to generate the sound. And that I was losing my voice a lot in the 90s, actually. And that one lesson really
Okay. Really? You did only one? Like
yeah,
the
I did only
complete vocal
one.
technique. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like an hour and a half lesson, and she connected my brain to that muscle. And boy, it not only revolutionized my singing, but it kind of introduced me to deep breathing, and which led to meditation and all kinds of other stuff later. So
You've always been like searching, because you did all of these bands. Like, I mean, you broke up the Presidents in like late 97, and you always kept like doing these. You have so many different projects, you always been like looking for that musical itch to scratch, if I could use that metaphor.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I don't choose. It's not like I'm thinking, I wonder what it would be like to make a rockabilly album or something. I'm just going by inspiration and instinct, and I'm following messages that are coming from somewhere else, or maybe inside me. I don't know, but they're impulses, just this feels good here. Okay. Yeah. And until it doesn't feel good. And then I stop, and then I look for the next thing that feels good. And then I ride that until it doesn't feel good. And then I stop. But if I were to continue to ride the things that are successful, I would get stuck in that palette or that mode. And I feel like stopping is essential, because then it opens up space for a new sound to come up and self-known. And that was tricky, like the Presidents. I really wanted to quit right when we got signed. I wanted to pull a Sex Pistols and just be frozen in our state, our young early state, as this perfect little band. But then again, on the other hand, like, how many times do you get the opportunity to do this whole thing with a major label and MTV and all this radio and stuff? And I just like, I want to see what that's like. So I just kind of kept writing it. But deep down, I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. It was a real kind of funny combination of like liberation and trapped that were happening at the same time. And I went to a band meeting in late 97, summer of 97, I guess it was, and just said, first order of business, I quit, and just dropped a bomb on those guys. And yeah, I regret doing it that way. But in some ways, I think Dave was also relieved, because it had gotten so like not balls, and we didn't really have guidance, or we didn't listen to our guidance, yeah, in order to kind of calm down. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's important. What I'm trying to say is winners quit all the time. There's that saying, winners never quit. It's the exact opposite. Winners always quit when it's time to go, and that makes space for the next thing. So,
right, like you've described that you like you were saying earlier, like you couldn't write music for fun. You were just constantly,
yeah,
that must have taken a lot of the joy out of, I mean,
yeah,
because music obviously has always been a big part of you. So yeah, I can imagine it being very stifling,
yeah, it was. And it got to the point where I couldn't really tell the difference between the new Green Day single and the music in a Sprite commercial or a soda pop commercial. Like, what is happening here? Is the song selling the idea of Green Day, or is Green Day really making this song from a place of genuine inspiration, or is it just a jingle so you won't forget about the product that is Green Day? Like, it just, my mind got completely warped by it. I just got lost. It was really spooky.
I mean, do you think you people would look differently at the President if you had just done this album and then just like,
Yeah, I don't know.
Because to fans, to a fan like me, I really appreciate to have that second album, and the Pure Frosting compilation, which was huge also in Iceland, really funny. That was
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Because for other people, you're just this Peaches band maybe, and they don't really, pay attention
Yeah.
either way. No, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought exercise. I'm not sure. You know, I think there are a lot of people that think of us as just that first record, and then they completely lost the story after that, which is fine, which is totally fine. I don't have any sort of, I have nothing but absolute love and pride in what we did. And if anybody has, I mean, there's probably some people out there that only know Pure Frosting and have never heard the other albums, So I'll just take what I can get. It's really, but yeah, I don't know. I guess if we had broken up like the Sex Pistols ended up getting back together. So even
Right.
they were
Right.
not completely frozen in their perfect state.
Right.
And in fact, I remember we played some shows with the Sex, on the same bill, like a festival type show. And I did not want to see them old and fat. And I remember just like playing our set and running away back to the hotel so I wouldn't even hear them because I just did.
Really.
Oh yeah, I did not want to have anything to do with like reorganizing my inspirational vision of that band. I love the Sex Pistols. That snapshot in time, the Nevermind the Bollocks album, is just it's like I don't know, it's like a prayer.
Did Columbia put out Pure Frosting without, or did you guys put it out? How was that?
I think we curated it and they
Okay.
put it out. Yeah, yeah. And then they ended up putting out they had the right to put out a greatest hits album, which they did. But that was whatever. That's fine.
I can see they put out because you licensed the record only for 7 years, so I can see they put out a pressing in 2001, right before they lost the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
good business deal, like you often talked about when you got big. Like you started writing songs, Dave went into the business, and Jason did the PR. That's and you licensing the album. That's what a power move, good
Yeah,
move.
it was. Yeah, I believe that was Dave Dieter's idea, or maybe Dave and Jason cooked that up or maybe it was our lawyer. I'm not sure. But man, that was a great decision because we didn't ever want to do the cliche where we take all this money up front, tour support and everything, and advances, and like move into fancy houses. We didn't want to change our lives, really. We just wanted to pay our rent and have a practice space and maybe buy a new amp and a new guitar. So I think for about 6 months or 9 months, they gave us 10 grand a month to cover our living expenses and stuff. And that was our only advance. And the first couple tours, we took a bus out and then we got the bill for the bus and went, no more buses. So we immediately went into van life and never left the van format for the rest of our whole career. So because we were very concerned with coming home with money, like this is not only fun and funny and happy and everything, but let's make it successful. So yeah, and I really appreciated that we all three were very dedicated to that idea. Nobody was like trying to, live the high life. We just did our job and got paid and made people happy. And so that part of the whole operation was really beautifully handled, really.
So did Columbia own the second album? How was that?
They still own the second. Yeah, they still own the second album, not the publishing, but the masters. They still own.
They
Yeah.
do. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we're working on doing all of our albums on vinyl in pairs. We did Froggy Style in the debut, and we're working on Love Everybody and Freaked Out and Small. And then we want to do the second album, even though it's not in chronological order, but it takes time to get clearance. We have to figure out how to get Columbia to allow us to do that without charging us a crazy amount of money or something. I don't know how it works.
Okay.
And
Are you still working with Bandbox, or how is that?
it's terrible. They just
Really?
went out of business.
They went, no,
Yeah.
really? Okay.
They went bankrupt and they took everybody's money.
No way.
Yeah. We got the debut and Froggy Style done. I believe.
You just did like a compilation of your first 4 solo albums on Bandbox, like earlier this year, right?
Yeah. Yep, I did that. So there's a bunch of those that have not shipped out that people have paid for. And then there's a ton, I think, of Love Everybody and Freaked Out in Smalls that I think have been manufactured and are sitting in a warehouse in in Milwaukee. And nobody can get at them. So we don't know what's happening yet. We're in the dark, and we're trying to figure it out and figure out how to get records into people's hands who've already paid. It's terrible. It's one guy who mismanaged the thing into the ground, and appropriate for what we were just talking about. He was, as I understand it, living beyond his means, kind of spending all the money on himself and not on the company. I don't quote me on that. I'm not sure, but that's the impression I'm getting, is it was sunk by one ego.
Damn.
Yeah.
But those were nice additions, really nice. Like I saw you on Instagram showing your compilation album with like a fanzine thing with pictures, and like it looks really good. Are you gonna keep doing those with another label or put it out yourself?
Yeah, my intention was to do them with Bandbox every 4 albums. So I guess I'm going to find another label. I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone else will be into doing the zine type thing. Maybe someone will take over Bandbox and restart it and get it back up and running. So that would be the greatest outcome, obviously, and it would just be a time delay. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not the kind of business person who searches out partnerships like that. I'm taking a page out of Quincy Jones's playbook. It's a long story, but I was on a public television station variety show type thing, and Quincy Jones was on there too, and he was being interviewed, and I was listening to him talk, and he's like, somebody said, how do you start? How do you get your foot in the door in the business? And he said, you just take whatever's in front of you and do the best you can to make it the best piece of music you can possibly make, and then wait for it to open doors for you. Wait for the phone to ring. So he's like, I'm not the kind of person who picks up the phone and calls people. I'm the kind of person who answers the phone and entertains, collaboration ideas or whatever, entertains opportunities. So that's me. That's what I do. I don't make anything happen. I just respond. Right. So I'm just going to say, I figured that the energy I would be using to try to make things happen is better used in the studio making music. Right. You're going to keep just doing these solo albums every January and July for the unforeseeable future. Like this is what you're doing now. You're happy with what you're doing, right? Oh yeah, I am super happy with what I'm doing. It's like going back to what I was before the Presidents, like the guy with a 4-track being weird with a 4-track, except I'm doing it with a computer now. But I'm basically treating the computer like a big tape deck. I'm not super fancy with the computers, but yeah, I just really, the process is so fun, so intuitive now. And just like, I watch movies, I absorb inspiring content, and a lot of times that creates ideas for songs. I've got this trend going right now where I'm writing songs about people like David Bowie and Iggy Pop and Andy Warhol and Lou Reed. And like, I'm watching documentaries about these people and then kind of understanding them, and then writing sort of like a impressionistic song of their psyche or something. Nice. And yeah, so I'm very satisfied. This is a very deep well, and I think I've got like something like 90 songs right now that are in various states of disrepair, and maybe 90% of them are ready to release. All right. Okay. So I'm just riding the wave and living on an island and walking in the woods and eating good food and hanging out with my incredibly awesome wife and making art and just being I talk to my son who's 25 or 26, and he's kind of poking his way through life like I did in my 20s. And I feel like I'm back in my 20s. It's pretty great. Nice. It sounds good. Yeah. Formless days punctuated by musical high notes. So. Right.
I want to be mindful of our time. I just want to really thank you for taking the time to do this, man. I
Yeah,
really do
sure.
appreciate it.
I appreciate your heavily researched questions, and it's fun to get an opportunity to expand on stuff a little bit because I'm not covering the same ground. But yeah, thank you for being prepared. I just recently hosted a sort of interview. I interviewed Rainn Wilson from The Office about his new book in front of a live audience, and I got a sense of what it's like to be an interviewer, and it's way harder than I thought.
I mean, it's really fun I only interview people who I look like, who inspired me, or who I really, I interview people who I really am interested in researching. So,
Yeah, that makes a big difference. And I was very interested in what Rainn is doing these days and how he's kind of spreading these ideas about spiritual revolution. So it was fun to dig into the material. But yeah, I have a newfound respect for a talented interviewer, of which you are one.
Thanks, man. It's also just like, because you said like never meet your heroes, and I researched, you was like, okay, Chris is actually just as nice as I thought he would be. He's not a guy who smiles on camera and then tells people to fuck off, like Brian Eno.
Yeah, Brian. Well, I mean,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I know, but you know what? If I were Brian Eno, I would have taken that conversation into the backstage area, and I don't know if I would have stood in front of the lecture hall.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
He was sort of setting himself up, but anyway, it makes a way better story to say I was told to fuck off by Brian Eno. Then I shook his hand and said, "Oh, it's great to meet you." So. Anyway,
cool, man. I'll probably catch up with you at some other time, and just thank you for all of the music, everything you've done, man. Like it's appreciated.
I appreciate that. And actually, my wife bought a package deal at a fundraiser, an Iceland trip. So
okay,
we're coming to Iceland sometime in the next 2 years. It's a 3-year window, and we've already eaten up a year. So at some point in the next 2 years, we're coming to Iceland. So
like hit me up. I'll hook you up with like great Indian food. I'll curate some good shit for you if you want to. Like make some suggestions.
Yeah, man. I'll save your contact information. I'll let you know when we're coming. Maybe we can. Yeah, Indian food in Iceland sounds delightful.
It's the best restaurant my favorite restaurant. Yeah, but I can get you some fermented shark and something. Like, I grew up eating sheep testicles with rice pudding, if you can believe that. That was the norm in the east of Iceland in a small fishing village. Yeah.
That's hardcore shit, man.
Very, very.
Oh, shit. I'm a huge pickled fish fan. My wife isn't as much, but I'm all over the pickled and tinned fish. Yeah. All right. Well, great. Real pleasant hanging out with you. And thanks for taking time to chat.
All the best.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.